Welcome to Startup Brainframe, where we translate brain science for startups who want to build the future. Today, we're looking at a really compelling example of how understanding human behavior, even before we had all the fancy tools of modern neuroscience, could drive just incredible business success.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to delve into how the Michelin Brothers transformed their tire company, and they did it in this surprisingly ingenious way by essentially creating the demand for their own product.
Really insightful story, isn't it? About looking beyond just your immediate product and really understanding what motivates your customers' actions. We've got some fascinating material here that shows how Michelin didn't just focus on making a better tire. They focused on shaping the very circumstances that would lead people to need more tires.
Exactly. We're going to explore that seemingly unusual connection, between tires and fine dining. It might sound a bit strange at first, right? Tires and restaurants.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's just a fantastic illustration of how to influence behavior. So the core question for us today is, how did a tire company become such a huge influencer in the restaurant world? This story really underscores the power of thinking beyond just the obvious features of your product.
Yeah, and tapping into those fundamental human drivers. And to really get it, you kind of have to remember the context. We're talking early 1900s. Car ownership, still pretty low.
Right.
So for the Michelin Brothers, this was a fundamental challenge, a big one. If not many people were driving cars, well, then not many people needed new tires. It's that simple.
Their growth was just capped, basically. Limited by how many people were driving and how much. Okay, so let's picture their situation. Instead of just, pouring all their effort into tire technology, which is what you'd probably expect, right?
The logical thing, yeah.
They took a completely different path. They shifted their focus away from the product itself and onto the behavior of potential customers. The crucial question they started asking was, what can we actually do to encourage people to drive more often?
And that is such a valuable question for any business, especially if you're facing adoption hurdles. Are you just laser focused on improving your product, your widget? Or are you thinking about the bigger picture, the whole ecosystem of behaviors that need to be there for your widget to become, essential?
Good point.
The Michelin Brothers answer, it was pretty innovative. It was the Michelin
Guide.
Initially, it was a free publication, just given away.
Yeah.
And it was packed with useful information for motorists, lists of hotels, mechanics, suggested routes for travel, that kind of thing.
And this is where the real genius kicks in, I think. It also included listings of restaurants.
Yes.
Which might seem like a totally random inclusion for a tire company, but it was brilliant.
Absolutely. Stroke of genius.
And the strategy, it worked so well because it tapped into something really basic. It tapped into the reward loop.
Exactly. The reward loop. Think about how the guide sparked that initial desire and made people think, where could I go? What new places are out there? What experiences? That's the anticipation part of the loop starting up.
Right, that what if feeling. And that anticipation then leads pretty naturally to the action, which is getting in the car and actually driving to these places.
And then the reward, the satisfaction of a really good meal, maybe finding a nice hotel, just the feeling of discovering something new. There's even a subtle element of social reward, maybe status, in finding and going to these places the guide recommended.
So you're saying Michelin wasn't just selling tires, not really.
And not just tires, man.
They were selling the idea of something bigger. Adventure, exploration, curiosity, and maybe even a bit of personal identity tied up in these journeys.
It's a prime example of what we now call behavioral design or behavioral engineering. They engineered a system where the behavior they wanted more driving became inherently rewarding in itself.
Okay, so the guide gets people driving, but then things get even more interesting, right?
They do. The story takes another fascinating turn in 1926. That's when they introduced stars for the restaurant ratings.
Ah, the star system.
Started with just 1 star, then later expanded to the, now world-famous 2- and 3-star system. And these ratings, they quickly gained this immense prestige.
Huge prestige. Chefs started aspiring to get a star, right? It became a goal.
Absolutely. And diners. They actively sought out these starred places.
Exactly. So these stars, they became more than just simple recommendations. They tapped into our deep-seated social wiring, our social brain.
That drive for status.
Yeah, as humans, we're often motivated by wanting status, recognition, maybe a sense of belonging.
And Michelin star. It evolved into this incredibly powerful symbol, a symbol of culinary excellence.
Think about a 3-star restaurant. It wasn't just a place to grab a bite.
Oh, definitely not.
It became a destination in itself, a place to experience a certain level of, well, prestige.
Yeah.
And maybe even be seen doing it.
And that really shows how embedding these kinds of markers, these symbols of status, within your product or service, it can turn users into really enthusiastic advocates, almost fans. They're not just consuming something, they're participating in a whole system of social validation.
And Michelin's branding here went way beyond just a simple logo or a catchy slogan. You have the guide itself, instantly recognizable with that distinctive red cover.
Iconic red, yeah.
Then the Babenda mascot, the Michelin Man, also iconic.
Very recognizable.
And that highly sought-after star system we just talked about. All these things acted as powerful anchors, these mental hooks, embedding the brand deep in people's minds.
And if you think about how our memory works, this kind of multifaceted branding probably engaged different memory systems. It wasn't just hitting one note. It was creating resonance across different types of memory.
Right. So you've got semantic memory. That's our memory for facts, general knowledge, like knowing Michelin equals quality, reliability for tires and dining.
Okay, so the factual association.
Then there's episodic memory. That's linking the brand to your own positive personal experiences, those great meals you had, those memorable road trips you took using the guide.
The personal connection.
Yeah.
The stories.
Exactly. And maybe even procedural memory, the sort of automatic, habitual response, like someone planning a trip just instinctively reaching for a Michelin guide without even thinking much about it.
So putting all that together, the result was that Michelin achieved something much deeper than just, a big market share. They captured mind share.
Mind share. That's a great way to put it.
They weren't just another tire company. They became this trusted authority, a respected voice in travel and fine dining. Completely different categories, really.
Okay, so pulling this back to our audience, startup founders listening in, there are some really valuable neuro-entrepreneurial insights we can take away from this whole story. First one, I think, is focus on solving for the behavior you need to see, not just the obvious functional need your product addresses. If your product isn't getting traction, even if it seems to fill a gap, take a step back, analyze the underlying behaviors that need to shift, and figure out how you can incentivize those shifts, just like Michelin did with driving.
That's such a critical point. Don't just build it and hope they come. Think about why they would come, repeatedly. And the second key takeaway follows from that. Consciously build reward loops into your user experience. Think about it. How can you create that anticipation? How do you enable the action? And what's the satisfying reward at the end?
Yeah, and that doesn't just apply to consumer apps, right?
Not at all. Even in B2B, think about it. Feelings of progress, getting clarity on complex data, increased efficiency, a sense of mastery or control. These can function as really powerful intrinsic rewards for users of business software too.
Good point. Okay, takeaway 1. Solve for behavior. Takeaway 2. Build in reward loops. What's third?
The third crucial lesson, I'd say, is empower your users. Give them a sense of autonomy, of control. Our brains really value that. We like feeling in charge.
We don't like feeling railroaded.
Exactly. So designing features that allow for meaningful choices, customization, maybe self-directed progress, that can significantly boost engagement and commitment. It reduces that feeling of friction, that sense of being forced down one path.
Makes a lot of sense. Give people agency.
Yeah. And what's just so interesting is that the Michelin Brothers' success, it happened way before the field of neuroentrepreneurship even existed, but it really stemmed from this intuitive, deep grasp of fundamental human psychology. They were, in a way, early pioneers in applying these kinds of principles, unknowingly perhaps, but effectively.
Their story really highlights the just enduring power of understanding what truly motivates people, even if those motivations aren't immediately obvious, like the link between wanting a good meal and needing new tires. Understanding that helps build successful businesses, design better systems, create lasting impact.
Which brings up a really thought-provoking question for you, the listener. Think about your own field, your own product or service. What seemingly unrelated elements could you potentially connect? How could you create a powerful, maybe unexpected incentive for your target audience to adopt behaviors that ultimately support what you're offering? Think creatively, like the Michelin Brothers did.
Absolutely. It really boils down to understanding those underlying human drivers, doesn't it? Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive.
We really hope this has given you some valuable insights, maybe sparked some new ideas.
Thanks for taking the time to tune in on today's episode. See you in the next one.